Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mer Hersoner podcast for a special episode live on YouTube. It's Thursday, February 2nd, 2023. I'm your host, Vicken Arabian, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Mr. Mike Balyan, where we discuss our great Armenian history, covering different eras, topics, and people. For today's topic, we will be exploring the conflict in Artsakh, the past, the present, and the future with a very special guest, Vicken Arabian from Support Our Heroes, joining us live in the studio. Thank you, Vicken, for being here.
Thanks for joining us, Vicken. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Vicken is an engineer, construction manager, and an information technologist. He is a graduate of California State Polytechnic University and the University of California, Berkeley. Starting in the 1990s as a volunteer, activist, and co-founder of various charitable organizations, Vicken has spearheaded and managed numerous strategic humanitarian projects in Artsakh, helping improve the serving and living conditions of the men and women of the Armenian Armed Forces, as well as numerous repatriation projects spanning from the southern Artsakh River Valley to the northern Karabakh region of Artsakh. Vicken is the president and the co-founder of Support Our Heroes. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome, Vicken. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've been going back and forth with one of your friends and board members as well, Edgar, and we've been wanting to get you on the show for a while. I know you do so much work. You're always traveling, and you're in Armenia and Artsakh. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
No problem. Now, before we dive into the entire situation in Artsakh, and we have questions prepared for you to kind of talk about your experience earlier in the 90s, you getting involved, and till now, we want to show a little video that Support Our Heroes has made. Correct? Yes. And it's just for people to get familiar with what is their purpose, what they're doing. Also, if you guys look at the screen on your top left, there's a hashtag. If you guys scan that, it will take you to Support Our Heroes page, and you guys can donate and help the cause. So that is the best way to get to their website while you guys are watching. So here is the video. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that video. Vicken, before we kind of dive into our main conversation, obviously I read a little bit of a quick bio about who you are, but we always like to have our audience to kind of get to know you in the sense of where were you born, where were you raised, and as an Armenian, and then we'll get into how you got involved with the first war and so forth from there.
Well, when people ask me about where I was born, I'd like to start with my grandfather.
Okay.
He was born in Dikranagert, in the heartland of Armenia. And my dad was born in Syria. He's a survivor of the genocide. My grandfather was a survivor of the genocide. Long story. It was a miracle he survived it. And I was born in Lebanon, and I moved to the U.S. when I was 18 years old. And all my three kids, I've got three boys, they were all born in the U.S. And I've continued on my life in Armenia. I've been there for just about 18 years now.
Wow. When was the first time did you ever go back before you came to the U.S., or you came here and then went to Armenia?
No, I moved to the U.S. when I was 18, as I said. I went to school here. I went to college here. I went to high school in Lebanon, graduated, Jemadan. And right after graduation, the war was just ravaging the country, and the higher education system was just in shambles at the time. So I decided to go to the U.S., come to the U.S., and basically continue my higher education here.
Yeah.
So, and then after I graduated, got married, and had kids, and I realized this is not
the place for you.
I raised my kids in Armenia. So, and so I was already going back and forth to Armenia as part of my charitable work, strategic charitable work. So I finally settled in Armenia in 2005, early 2005. And so that's short of my life story.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about your involvement with, as you mentioned, the humanitarian work that you started during the first Artsakh war, which was in the early 90s. Can you talk about that a little bit, how you got involved and what kind of projects you started doing there?
Well, after the war, we got together with some friends, and many parts of Artsakh, including some of the parts that were taken over by the Azeris, and we had reliberated during the war between basically 1990 and 1994, including areas in Mardagert, the newly liberated areas of Karbajar, Kashatagh, southern Kashatagh. They were people were either not living there or living there in incredibly poor conditions. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not just talking about residential, housing, and I'm talking about the basic necessities of water and power and gas and sewer, and so
no infrastructure.
Basically, there was absolutely no infrastructure. Whatever was there was destroyed by the Azeris. Even in some of the southern Hatrut regions, like villages like Arakul, they had kept the village under their control for 18 months, and during those 18 months, there was no village left. They had even cut down the oak trees, the walnut trees, and thinking that the Armenians will never come back if the trees are gone too. So they had basically completely destroyed the 1,000-year-old church, leveled it down to nothing, leveled every single house, even taken the stones from the house, so people will never come back. Of course, when they did that, they were thinking we wouldn't be able to liberate it again. So, and we did, and people came back. So our job was to rebuild that village, and just like it, we did many villages, and we rebuilt several villages, close to 10 villages from ground up, destroyed villages, and we also did a lot of work of building schools and kindergartens and medical centers. I'm talking rural, small medical centers. We did also build some larger medical centers for the army at the time in the southern areas of Artsakh. And we built some housing for the military as well, military families. And so that's how things started. Our goal was not purely humanitarian. In fact, our primary goal was not humanitarian. It was strategic. Yeah. Our goal was to make sure Armenians live in Artsakh, live in our homeland, and not. So liberation, to us, was never completed, would never be completed without Armenians living on those lands. Those are our ancestral lands.
For
most
thousands of
Artsakh.
years.
I'd say all of Artsakh is more Armenia than the center of Europe.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's proof of that. We've covered that throughout past episodes. We've done special episodes, and we all know. I mean, they can say whatever they want. Those are our ancestral lands for thousands and thousands of years. Artsakh has always been part of Armenia. But when you say built the infrastructure, was it difficult for people to comfortably move and start living there once you guys started building? Was there a process to, I don't want to say convince, but for people to be like, okay, I can go live here without feeling danger or anything of that sort?
Well, there were two categories of people. There were people who were displaced during or before the war, at the beginning of the war. So it was easier for us to bring them back. And we had at the time, now we're getting into some details.
Yeah.
We had purchased over 40 containers at the time. So we would locate, 10, 20 containers at a time in different villages. And we would bring people into the village, ask them to live in the container for about a year, year and a half, sometimes 2 years, with their kids, rough conditions, and give them the land, and they start cultivating the land. And then during that time, we would start constructing their house, and also the community center and medical center, whatever we needed to build in that village. So we would bring people back into the village temporarily for a year or two until they get their house. That way, they would feel comfortable. They would feel local. And the other category are people who didn't come from those villages, who basically didn't have a whole lot to lose anyway. They came from different parts of Armenia, and they were people who would, had we not given land and houses to, they would have probably left and gone to ex-Soviet countries or even the U.S. So we wanted, and we're talking mostly young multi-child families. So our goal was to strategically repatriate Artsakh. And of course, it looked like humanitarian, and it was humanitarian. It was
in part it is.
Yes, but our goal was never humanitarian. Our goal was strategic.
Okay.
We wanted to make sure that Artsakh was repopulated, and we didn't do a whole lot of. I mean, in the last 25 years, the work I've done in Artsakh, we haven't done a lot of infrastructure work, although we have closely coordinated our work with the government. Various branches of the government and various governmental agencies, including water, power. So, for example, in 2014, we built a school and also an open park in north of Kashatagh. And at the time we started work there in 2013 and 14, for 20 years they had no power. People literally lived in those 4 villages with no power at all. No water, no running water, no sewer, no gas, no power. And they were 3 hours away from the post, from where you enter. You go from the Sunnik Mars of Armenia to the Artsakh Mars of Armenia. So that the Zabuch post is what they call it. I hate that word, but anyways. So we're talking 3 hours of mountainous driving, off-road driving. You can't just get there with any car. Even my 4x4 Mitsubishi Pajero Montero would heat up by the time it got there. It was just rough. And that's in the summer. Imagine what would happen in the frozen mountains and the dangerous roads.
No.
So people literally couldn't leave their house for 6 months a year, and they lived without power, without water, without anything, and in really poor conditions. Houses were just shacks.
How
and they
often,
lived that way for 25
how often
years.
With those conditions? How often were they getting any sort of aid through those passes and whatnot? I mean, I'm curious how often there was like a turnaround or like a cycle.
Yeah, I mean, what were they living off of? Was it just
if they were getting anything?
Well, a lot of the food, as far as basic food necessities, they were basically cultivating their own gardens, and they had their own livestock. So they didn't really. Generally speaking, villagers are not in need of food.
Yeah,
they make their own food from the land and from their animals, and then they stock it for the winter as well. So. But it takes more than, animals eat also. Sorry, if you're a human being, you got to get good education. You got to have a prospect in life. You got to have hopes in life.
Of course,
hope in life. So people who lived in these villages, many of them had fought and stayed in those villages. They had fought during the First War, and they had fallen in love with a local, or just fallen in love with the nature, with the countryside, and they had decided to stay. Some of these guys had been there for since 1994, 1993, when we had liberated Kashatagh, 1992 and 3, and they had decided never to leave again, and they had come from different parts of Armenia. So, and that's how we treated these people for 25 years. They lived that way. So, for example, that those villages, those 4 villages. We built a school for 4 villages, and I contacted. They had no internet, by the way. Can you imagine without internet?
I mean, nowadays, no.
No cell towers,
no.
nothing.
Yeah, we're talking no refrigerators, no gas, no ovens, no cell towers, nothing. And we basically, and this was in 2013 and 14. So alongside doing our projects, which was building the school and furnishing it, and building and in the next village, we built what we call the Khachburak, which was they had 1,400-year-old khachkars in this, cross stones in this village. Basically, not just in the village, but all over the area. So we brought a lot of the khachkars. I asked the Guratis, the villagers, to help me. So we brought the equipment as far as kamazes and all that, trucks.
Yeah.
And with their help, they knew where the khachkars were, and some of them were right in the middle of the road. You would drive over them. They had been there for thousands of years. And so and there were a lot of churches there. We're talking, our ancestors had built hundreds of churches in the northern area of Artsakh. So we basically brought at least, I'd say about 15 to 20 of those khachkars, some of the nicer ones, into an area near the river. And we brought, and then by that time, we had applied to the government, and I had met with the officials. They brought power to the villages. And I had also contacted the president, the director of Karabakh Telecom, a friend of mine at the time. And so they brought in some cell towers, and they had power and internet. By the time we were done with the school a year later, they had power and internet. So they basically...
Now, this is in
were brought into civilization.
2013 when you guys started doing this.
We started in those particular villages, and that's just an example.
Let's say going back earlier.
13 and 15.
Okay.
Going back earlier, we've done a lot of projects all over Artsakh, including Karvajar, Kashatagh, Mardagert, Talish, Madaris. Depends. Some of the villages did have power. Mm-hmm. Most of them did not have gas. Back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, 2000s. And a lot of them didn't have working roads. You just couldn't get to those villages. So the first thing we would do is we would bring the trailers in, and we would start working with the local and also Stepanakert officials to help us. Basically, they were the ones who brought in the power. So when they heard we were going to build a new village there, or we were going to rebuild the old village, we got a lot of cooperation from the government. I can't say we didn't.
I was about to ask that next. What was the response with some of the local officials and whatnot, or administrations? How did they take to this? I mean, I can't imagine it would have been bad, but like you said, what was their cooperation like?
I can't remember an instance where they were welcoming us with open arms. But there were even some instances where they were basically preventing us from doing what we were doing for personal reasons. It was never.
I was just going to ask you, what would be the reason for somebody who's seeing someone like yourself or your group of the people that you're talking about that went in there and trying to rebuild these lands and bring people back? Like, what would, I mean, I know you're saying personal, but besides personal, is there like like, is it
greed and corruption?
That's what it always ends up being, right?
Yeah. What's in it for them? And there was there was never anything in it for them. Never. So here we are.
This is the Artsakh government we're talking about.
Yeah, here we are building a $150,000 project. And we're talking, 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. We're doing a $150,000 project in an area where no one ever has gone in. No tourists, no spukahai, no one. Even the locals don't go there except for maybe for elections. And we're going in there and building 25 houses and a school and a kindergarten. And so we're investing several $100,000. And by those terms at the time, and there's nothing in it for them. And I'm not saying that was widespread with everybody, every local or government official. Yeah. But we had our share of those people during the years. And to us, it really didn't matter because we had a goal. Our goal was to complete our project and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And
but what I mean by that is those people. How hard was it to go through those roadblocks?
Without their cooperation.
Was it a matter of like dealing with them and saying, "Okay, here's your little, breadcrumbs, go away," or did you guys have to go through a lot of hardship and
circumventions and whatnot?
Well, I can tell you this: the first 2-3 years, it was tough because no one knew me and my friends, and they felt free to put any roadblock they felt like in front of us. But eventually, over a few years period, we were known, and people knew that if they had put a roadblock in front of me, it would almost surely end up being worse for him.
Yeah.
Although it would probably delay my work and create problems for me and frustration and more cost. But at the end of the day, they would be in trouble themselves because I had enough pull with both enough government officials, with the army, commanders of the army, and just generally, we had enough pull. And, we never, a couple of times I remember giving press conferences and, basically making a big fuss about it. And so that was effective. But for the most part, we were able to solve our problems after the first few years because we were well known and they just didn't want to mess with us because it was too much risk for the local officials. So at the end of the day, we did what we had to do. And yeah, we had lots of problems and there were a lot of challenges. A lot of the challenges were not just the corruption, but also just challenges. You're driving 5 hours to get to the Artsakh River Valley, and you want to build a house there. You want to build 20 houses there. Imagine all the problems. There's no roads, there's no infrastructure, there's no
getting materials there.
I was just going to ask you,
just getting people to work there. There's no place for them to stay. There's no place for them to get food, and they got to work there for the next 2 years.
As far as the construction part of things, when you guys building, how did you guys end up getting those materials from the cement to the blocks or wood, whatever it was, to build these towns? How can you talk about that difficulty a little bit and the process of what you guys went through?
Well, my policy has always been to get local materials. Local starts from local, literally Artsakh.
Okay.
And still is today. Whatever we can get locally in Artsakh, we will get it. Now, Artsakh being part of Armenia, if we can't get it out of Artsakh, the Artsakh Mars of Armenia, we'll get it from other Marses. The closest is Sunik.
Yeah.
We can get it from Sunik, we'll get it from Sunik. If we cannot get it from Sunik, then we'll go to Yerevan and get it from Yerevan. So that was our policy at the time, 25 years ago. It is today. As far as workers, we've always had problems getting good expert construction workers in Artsakh. In general terms, Artsakhis are not expert construction workers. They work hard, but they're not. If you want good skilled
agriculture,
good skilled labor is harder to find in Artsakh. So, on the other hand, people of Sunik and Vayodzor, they're pretty good construction skilled labor. So we brought in some of the superintendents per se. How we say it here. Yeah. We brought in some of the organizers from Sunik, and then most other basically skilled labor came from Artsakh. So, and then we had to train him and all, but I always preferred to have locals, including people who were going to end up living in those villages, work on those sites. But we weren't always successful. But
appreciate what they built with their own sweat.
And even if they get paid for it, which
of course,
we didn't ask people to work for free for the next 2 years.
Of course,
they had their lands, but we try and do that. We're not always 100% successful, but our first priority is every time I go into a village, the first thing I do is I ask the village leader to, I ask him, I said, send me people. I need 25 people. So we need people. We're going to pay for them. We're going to pay them. We're going to pay them well. And we guarantee them jobs for the next year or two, whatever. And most of them are not skilled labor type of people.
Yeah.
They're not used to getting up in the morning and
early in the morning.
They're villagers. They want to cultivate their lands, and they have seasons. Certain seasons they don't do anything at all. Other seasons they get up in the morning at 6 a.m. and they go. So it depends.
Who's going to milk the cow? 5 in the morning.
That's so interesting.
Winter time.
It isn't about being lazy or not. It's not. It's a lifestyle.
They have their seasons.
Yeah. They don't have they're not in that lifestyle of getting up, doing it 6 days a week and coming back from work every day. It's just not that way. So that's why it's hard to find skilled labor in Artsakh. Not that there aren't any. There are, but it's harder to find them. And so bottom line is we that was our policy, and we did it kept doing it until 2016. In 2016, we intensified our work with, that's when I started the new organization, Support Our Heroes, with my friends. The first two basically co-founders was myself and Harac Simonian, my dear friend. And that was the second day I went to the front.
Simonian, is that Sebu's father?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
Yes,
right. Sebu's a good friend. So
Sebu's a great friend.
Sebu Simonian, capital cities. Give him our best when you see him.
I will. In fact, Sebu had a fundraiser for us last year. Was it in September? I think it was September.
It was September. Okay.
Yeah, he had a major fundraiser at his house last year. It was a very successful fundraiser, not only in terms of financial income, but also in terms of visibility and PR for us, and people. Basically, a lot of artists, a lot of young people over there, and
get them involved. And
we more than half our job is to basically get our message out, which is, in simple terms, Artsakh is Armenia, and there is no Armenia without Artsakh.
Yeah.
So if we fight for Artsakh, we fight for all of Armenia.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. First, I want to thank everybody who's joining us tonight live. Thank you, everyone. If you guys have any questions for Vicken, please feel free to ask us in the live chat. Also, as you can see, there's the hashtag on the top. If you guys scan that, it will take you to their page, which is supportourheroes.am, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and you guys can donate. One thing I want to announce is if starting today for this month, if you guys go to the Mer Hersoner and purchase anything you want and use the promo code Artsakh, all capital letters, it'll give you 10% off, and then we will donate another 10%. We'll match that to support our heroes. So for this month, everybody go out there and you'll save, and a portion of it will go to support our heroes from our side as well. And we'll put the link up for everybody to go ahead and take care of that. That's a little bit thing from us to you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate all the work you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a question?
Can you walk us through some of the programs and services that you've offered since the beginning, since post 94, and how it's kind of evolved ever since then into support our heroes?
Well,
I mean, you've kind of covered a few of the things, like what you've built, what you're doing, but how much broader does it get?
Well, in the 90s, it started out being civilian, but also civilian military. In other words, we didn't and we still do not provide military assistance to the army, but we do provide humanitarian assistance to the families of those who serve in the army. So whether it's humanitarian, medical, so we have been doing that from the beginning. For example, we built, back in the 90s and early 2000s, we built a hospital, a major hospital in the military barracks of Araler, which is one of the largest military barracks of Azerbaijan, taken over by Azerbaijan nowadays, but it was one of the largest in Artsakh. And that's the kind of line of work we were in. Our goal was to repatriate Artsakh. And if repatriating the families of the soldiers was necessary, we did that. If providing health services to them by building a hospital in the barracks, because that's where the families lived or nearby, or if we had to build a village near it, to basically reinforce our population near the barracks. So we did. Our entire goal was based on strategic repatriation of Artsakh. So we didn't do anything, and we still do not do anything outside of Artsakh. In fact, up until the 2016 war, everything we did was in the liberated territories. And not only that, but it was also in strategic locations of the liberated territories. So we even designed a map of all of Armenia, including the Mars of Artsakh, the district of Artsakh. And on the map, we had the red dots showing all of the strategic locations where we need to have denser population. And we coordinated the development of that map with the government of Artsakh. And we wanted to make sure that that concept, or that basically philosophy is not only ours, but everybody adopts it. The entire nation adopts it, because we knew that we would never complete the liberation of Artsakh as a nation if we don't live in those lands.
Absolutely.
And fact is, 28 years after liberation, we never really liberated it, because there were no more than 150,000 people living in Artsakh on September 27, 2020. So the fact is that had we had a population of 500,000,
double that or triple that,
it's funny you mentioned that.
Everything would have been different. I'm convinced it would have been different.
I mean, we've talked about this before, and the biggest problem I had was, this is something that you can take the playbook from Israel, what they did. Every time they took a little bit of land, what they did was build, move people. and that's how you kind of liberate lands, right? I mean, and we never did that. It's like, why was all that land empty? When you're talking about when the villages they kept taking over, yeah, you had this village, but there was like 20 people living there. If there was 100,000 people living there, it would have been a completely different story, right?
Yes.
But what was the issue? Why were they against that?
Well, I mean, in terms of what, like,
28 years. You said 28 years, right?
Well, from 1992 to 2020 is what I'm counting.
Yeah. Okay. 28 years.
Was there a hesitation amongst the populace to repatriate? Was there some sort of issue that you noticed over all this time of, let's say, not enough people repopulating the area?
Well, I don't think
anything that may have stuck out, for instance.
Well, here's the thing. Part of what I've been doing the last, 25 years, and especially when I lived in the U.S., a major part of what we did was educating our diaspora, mostly the U.S. and Canada. And I traveled around the U.S. and Canada for years, and I gave PowerPoint presentations, videos. I was going back to Artsakh, typically every 2 to 3 months. We were preparing before and after videos of what we were doing, of the work we were doing, not only as a reporting method and also as a way of convincing people to give money, but to finance our future projects, but also to basically bring Artsakh into people's homes and families and living rooms. And I can tell you this, we are all guilty as a nation, including the diaspora. I don't know whether it's 5 million or 10 million, it doesn't matter, but very few were educated enough, knowledgeable enough about Artsakh.
Yeah.
So sympathy and love comes with knowledge. If you're not familiar with your own country, with your homeland, I don't know what you're going to love. You're going to love the idea of the homeland, but homeland is people, right? I mean, it's not the stones and the rocks and the mountains. As historic as Dizag is, I've actually climbed the mountain of Dizag, but many years ago, which is in Hatrut, which is the old name of Hatrut, but that's not what I remember. The first thing I remember when I think of Hatrut are the people of Hatrut. And so we left those people basically completely unattended. We left them, we ignored them for 28 years. Our historic towns and villages that we spent an incredible amount of energy and resources and blood liberating in the 90s, and we never really completed that liberation. And when I say we're all guilty of it as a nation, that includes the successive governments of Armenia, obviously. And they had a huge role to play in educating the locals, Armenian citizens, but also educating the diaspora. None of that happened. And whatever effort was put in to repopulate Artsakh strategically, I'm not saying no effort was put in, and we were certainly not the only ones doing it, but it was just a handful of organizations who were seriously doing it.
I'm sure.
On a consistent basis.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, we were one of them, but we were just one of the few, and that couldn't have been enough. We needed a Hamasgain organization. We needed everybody involved, every political organization, the various churches we have, including the Giligya Church, the Echmiadzin Church, including the Missionary Association. Everybody needed to be involved. This had to be starting from May 1994, the day after the basically cessation of hostilities was signed. The next day we had to start. We should have started basically making the land our homeland.
Yeah.
And it was always our homeland. It still is our homeland in our hearts, but that's not enough. And
I think also, if I can add to that, me being born in Armenia, in Yerevan, we came in 88, and that's right in 87, 88 when the movement started and the protests and everything. I got to say, even as a kid, and I've talked about this before, we didn't know much about Artsakh. Even Yerevansis there at that time no one was educated about Artsakh. Some people didn't even know where Artsakh was. They didn't even know the name Artsakh. They knew it as Karabakh, Kazain Karabakh Tsinekov or something. We didn't know. So again, the lack of education is everything. And that, like you said, it's everybody's fault. Diaspora, Armenia, governments, this and that. Because, if you don't teach about your lands, your history, where you come from, then people don't care. And I think also once the liberation happened, people got really comfortable. And it was like, okay, we got the lands. They completely forgot about it. And then obviously there was a lot of...
It was a war-win story.
Yeah, there was a lot of corruption involved as well. We can talk about this for hours. But again, I completely agree with you that it is everybody's fault. And I think the same thing is happening right now. No one is understanding how important this territory is. And when people say, well, it's the 7 regions, it was given back, we had occupied. It's like, no, this is our land. We never occupied. This was liberated. And people need to start understanding that.
We've inhabited that portion of the Armenian highlands longer than we have anywhere else. And all the push and pull that you and I have talked about with all of our episodes so far, with all the stories that we've portrayed to everybody, it's the one region that was ours for, over 2 millennia?
Yeah. I mean, simple, this shirt,
way more.
Vartan, after Vartan, died on the battlefield, who came to their aid, to all the military, all his, warriors and everybody? Artsakh. Vahanan's war, Artsakh. Like, nobody knows this stuff. And it's unbelievable. And the problem, and one of the reasons we talked about this show, and we've had some amazing people contact us and talk about what we're doing. They love it. They're praising us. But we need to get this education into schools, Armenian schools. Teach, so these kids know how important these lands are for us.
Well, one of the bigger problems has been the whole mentality and the education, as you mentioned, of what is Artsakh for us. Is it a territory of historic and spiritual or moral significance to us where Armenians live? Is it Armenia? Is it another Mars of Armenia that's critically important to us because we love it, because we feel good about it, because we spent our blood liberating it? Is it politically important because without Artsakh, Armenia wouldn't survive? And we're seeing the result of all that. We've been seeing it the last 2 years since the last battle. So I think it's all of the above.
I was just going to say,
And in the face of all those realities, the 3 things I just said, what has the government of Armenia done the successive governments, the past 28 years, 30 years? What have they done? They've said, there's Armenia, and then there's Artsakh, and then there's Spirk, the diaspora. And then they even came up with a fancy word for it. They called it the Yeramias Nuchun. So to me, every time I've heard that term, the Yeramias Nuchun term, I've basically, there's an Armenian way of saying it. I think I was telling myself,
you're eating yourself inside. Like,
how much can you hate your country to divide it up? To divide up the population of your nation into 3 different categories.
Yeah.
I mean, if that was being done, when that was being done by the Soviet Armenians or Soviet Armenian governments or Soviet Union, I can understand it. But there is absolutely no justification. So at the end of the day, what did we fight for? What have we fought for the past 30 years?
That was the first.
We fought for Armenia.
That was the first question.
How many homelands do we have? A single homeland.
Yeah.
And we basically kept, even today, I refuse that term categorically to say Armenia and Artsakh. It's Armenia including Artsakh.
Yeah.
It's the same as saying Armenia and Shirak, Armenia and Armavir. There is no difference between Armenia and Shirak and Armenia and Artsakh. Absolutely no. In fact, it's even worse. Because if there is a region of Armenia, a Mars of Armenia that's dearest to our heart, it's definitely Artsakh. If there is a district, a region of Armenia that we've put more effort, more blood, more money, more everything, more of our lives into the past 30 years, it's Artsakh.
Yeah.
If there's a more geographically, geopolitically politically, I don't know how you want to put it, every other way, more critical to keep Armenian, to keep part of Armenia than Artsakh. It's Artsakh. So, I mean, all of this is so true, but at the same time, we kept the same line that the governments have sold us, Armenian governments have sold us, that there's Armenia and there's Artsakh. And eventually a whole generation came across that way, and people are now, even in Artsakh, are saying, we have our own country.
Yeah.
Not everybody.
Yeah.
And I have personally been extremely vocal about this, saying, stop it. There is no Armenia and Artsakh. There's Armenia and
it's like saying Armenia and Sunni. Like it's the same thing. Armenia is Armenian. I agree with you. And then there was also this that generation that grew up hearing this. There was this romance towards Artsakh. Everybody who went to Armenia be like, Artsakh cannot say this. Like if Artsakh was, like I said, a different state or something. It's like, no, Armenia call it Armenia. Artsakh is just another region.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, we've programmed ourselves so much, and that's the government's fault. That is the government.
Much of it has been.
Yeah. And we need to stop saying that. Even now they're saying, don't say Artsakh is Armenia. Like if it's like, you're going to get arrested or something.
I've heard that thrown around too much.
We've been saying it for 30 years, and we're going to keep saying it.
Yeah.
There is no other way.
Of course.
And the other side of this story is this Yera Miastachun so-called, which is, and I still hear that term from government officials today.
Yeah.
And I say, what are you talking about? There is no Artsakh and Armenia. There's Armenia. So that's two. And what about the Spirk? For 30 years, for 100 years, we've been saying we are Armenians. We belong to one country, Armenia. And that country was not independent. It was under another country's political regime. Fine. I know people might argue with me about this, but that's not the point here. The point is, Armenia became independent in 1991. Whether it was completely free of, foreign, powers and all, that's a different story, a different discussion. Fact is that Armenia has been independent for over 30 years, 32 years now, 31 years, and we still haven't realized that the only way to go forward as a nation is to not categorize the diaspora as a different entity of Armenians. Okay, it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter it doesn't even matter what your mother language is. Even if you're in Australia, Sydney, and you don't speak Armenian that well or at all, but if you feel Armenian, okay, then you're part of our country. Even if you're not a citizen of Armenia, it doesn't matter. We have to create a whole ideology and push that ideology, starting from the government to the diaspora organizations to just individuals like us, which is based on the simple fact that every Armenian needs to make Armenia the epicenter of their life. If Armenia is not the epicenter of every Armenian's life, then they're not Armenian. Sorry, but they're not Armenian. You can't be a nationalist. You can't even be an Armenian by just,
like you said earlier, the idea of it.
No, this is not an idea anymore. I was born and raised in a country where I had no access to my homeland. My homeland was Sovietized. It was under a different regime. Fine, that's all acceptable. It was acceptable back then. But then at the time, Armenia was a picture on the wall for me. Mount Ararat was a picture on the wall for me. So I'm not guilty of the fact that my grandfather survived the genocide and I was born in Lebanon. That's just the way things were, arranged. History arranged that for me. But then we are all guilty of the fact that if we do not make Armenia the epicenter of our lives, then what is Armenian about us? What is it? Is it the food we eat? Is it the dance we dance? Is it the drink? Is it the songs we sing?
Yeah.
Because all that's going to go away. And the fact is, I've always believed this. The diaspora might think, many diasporans I know think that Armenia needs our help, right? Needs the diaspora's help. Whether it's financial or any other way, political. Yes, there's no question the diaspora has put a lot of effort into helping Armenia over the last 30 years. But the reverse is also true, and we have not taken advantage of that. The assimilation of the diaspora in generations, that's happening really fast on the west side of in the Western world, could have been a lot slower had it been had we applied that ideology nationally, where Armenia would become basically the center of our lives.
Yep.
So every Armenian should think that way. We need to start making an effort to bring Armenia into our lives, and not just part-time, not only on Thanksgiving Day or, not when things, not when there's a crisis. No, that's a crisis reaction mode. We need to have Armenia in our lives every day.
I agree.
And there are many ways to do that, and we don't have enough time to go into all the details today. And there's a major role to play for the Armenian government here. And instead of creating diaspora ministries or diaspora whatever vartuchuns, they need to think about how to bring Armenians
back
into Armenia's life and bring Armenia into Armenia's life in every corner of the world, whether they're sitting in Canada, in Lebanon, in Jordan, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And there's many ways to do that. And as a person who used to be a professional diasporan, because I was born and raised in two different countries, Lebanon and the U.S., and as someone who's lived a large part of my life in Armenia today, I've got a vision of all of that. I mean, I've got a pretty good understanding of how that could.
Yeah.
If I was just born and raised in Armenia, I probably wouldn't even say these things because I wouldn't understand. I wouldn't have the concept. But
you've been on both sides of the fences.
Yeah, I have been, and I think, and I'm really upset about the fact that we are still continuing on the same path of basically saying we're Armenians, we're citizens. It doesn't matter whether you're a citizen of Armenia or not.
You're Armenian.
Where every single Armenian in the world is a citizen of Armenia, whether they hold that passport or not. We need to treat them that way.
Yeah.
They need to feel that way, not only spiritually and morally, but we also need to put that obligation on them. Because Armenia isn't about crisis and wars and telethons. Armenia is about being Armenian every day and feeling responsible towards every single person who lives in Armenia today. If we want to have rights in the diaspora, if we want to go out and participate in rallies and whatever else, then we owe it to our country to be part of the country's life, to take responsibility for everything that goes right and wrong in Armenia. And I'm talking about, when I say we, I mean the diaspora. Although I'm not a diaspora Armenian, I haven't been for a long time now, but I'm saying we.
Good on you.
Vicken, I mean, not to push back, but don't you think also the Armenians in Armenia kind of, what's the right way to say this? Is like, I feel like they don't welcome the diasporans because they feel like the diasporans think, and I think this is a completely miscommunication between the two sides, is they think that because we help with financially, we're better than them somehow. So because I've heard that a lot, like they're not, like the Armenians there don't like the diasporans that much. What would you say to that?
Vic, I could say this. I'm living proof of the fact that that theory is wrong. I have been in Armenia for about 18 years now, and not to say that there haven't been, uneducated, and I don't mean education in terms of academic education, just people who aren't
ignorant,
just ignorance.
Yeah.
Not to say that there aren't those kinds of people in every country. We have our share of those people, and I've seen and heard some terrible things, but you know what? There's many more of those in the U.S. or in France or any other country. So that's not unique to Armenia. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that we, as diasporans, a lot is dependent on you, on how you look at Armenians. And Armenia isn't the land; it's the people.
Yeah.
And how you treat the people in Armenia is the first thing that we need to realize is the key on how you want to be treated back, because there's a lot of good people there. The vast majority of people are good-hearted, and they are going to welcome you with open arms and open hearts if they realize that you feel that you are one of them.
Yeah.
The first thing I told my kids when we got to Armenia 18 years ago, I said, there's no more them and us. I remember this vividly. Yeah. I remember the day. I remember where we were sitting in the living room. In fact, I did it before we left Glendale. We were living in Glendale at the time. And I said, look, I've heard this term for years. Everybody says it. Us and them.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's where I'm getting at. Yeah.
That's it. We're done.
Yeah.
And I said, from this day on, tomorrow we're leaving. We're going to Armenia. Literally, we were leaving the next day. And I said, it's all about us. We're part of the us now. There are no more them and theirs. It's all us.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's a problem, we're going to own it in Armenia. If there's
together,
yeah. Even if we're not personally responsible.
Yeah.
Even if we're not citizens yet of the country, it doesn't matter. Morally, nationally, every other way we
You're
feel
part of
citizens
it.
of the
That's
country the minute we landed there. In fact, I felt that way before I went to Armenia. But the fact is that we should all work towards making every Armenian feel that way.
Yeah.
And we haven't done that. And that's why there are people, even government officials, the highest officials, making announcements about Yeramias Luchuns and Spirkin.
Well, I mean, recently, Zare Sinyanyan, is he the one who represents apparently the diaspora? I mean, his interview, again, it's that, I don't know what's happening, but he himself is saying the same thing. There's this divide happening, and we need to stop this. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the fatigue after the war. I think a lot of the diasporans thought by donating they're going to win the war. Like, that's not how you win wars, by donating money. Like, it's not an investment of a building where you invested and the building didn't get to be erected, and all of a sudden you're pissed off at the developers. Like, I feel like that's the concept they had over here. I think also a lot of the diasporans feel that they can, if they're educated here, we follow a different system here where, let's say we grew up here, the way the laws work and everything. When we over there, we look at them, if we try to give them advice, then we feel like they're going to think we're judging them. So there's so many things happening here.
Well, it's the assimilation, like you mentioned earlier. We're from a different part of the world that has a different set of rules, and we walk at a different, or march to a different drum beat, right? As opposed to what they do. Now, this is just a typical thing in life. However, that's not what should separate us at all, ever. Just like he said, you step foot there, you are us. We are us.
No, but that's the thing.
it.
What I'm saying is that us should start from here. It shouldn't be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's what I'm saying.
The point I'm trying to get to is, how do we get rid of this divide that we have, that we think we're better than them, they think we're judging them, this bickering back and forth. I mean, you got ARF, AYF, I don't know how many Fs, all these organizations now against the government. The government is blocking them, and it's just like, okay, how far? This is not going to be unity. How are we going to? The country's not going to survive.
Well, I've strongly believed, and I might have even been guilty of doing this myself when I was living in diaspora, but I don't think I was as guilty as many people I've seen, but still, I'll admit it. But the reality is that, there's an old saying, this is, if you want to fly, earn your wings. Mm-hmm. I don't think collectively, and I don't mean to, criticize individuals or organizations specifically, but some of the largest organizations, political or not, in the diaspora, and members of those organizations, or people who aren't members of any organizations, I think they have, and I see it every day, I see it today, they give themselves the right to express opinions about Armenia's daily life, whether it's political, military. They are very outspoken and vocal about what should have been done, what should be done today, what in any field, whether it's educational ministry or education ministry or any other ministry making a decision. All of a sudden, you see people revolting against them here. My approach to that is very simple. The people who are really upset about that, the first thing they need to do is educate themselves on what really goes on in Armenia, and not spend 30 minutes a day or 30 minutes a week on Facebook and read about everybody else's blogs and make a so-called educated opinion about what's really going on.
Just headlines.
Because the fact is that the vast majority of what I see in the diaspora is the result of lack of knowledge. People just aren't, they're either misinformed or uninformed.
Yeah.
And between the two, most diasporans who are, they love Armenia, they want to do something good for Armenia, but because they're miseducated, many times purposely miseducated by political organizations, and many times just uneducated because they haven't invested the time. And this goes back to what I said about Armenians need to make Armenia the center of their lives, the epicenter of their lives. And if they do that, then they will be eventually, in just a few months period, they'll be in touch. They'll be, havortavats with Armenia. They'll understand what's going on, why it's going on, who's who, and they'll feel part of everything that goes on in Armenia. And it's going to be hard at that point to miseducate, misinform those people.
It's the same. It's the same way. I mean, the best way you can describe it, in my opinion, is you have a home here. You built a home, right? You know everything. When you're out at work,
course.
you're out
Every
somewhere.
nook and cranny,
Every
everything. Yeah.
time you know what's happening at your home. That's how it should be. Once you build your home there, and even if you're not there, you know what's happening there. That's the connection.
Yeah, but it's extremely easy to misinform people when they're disinformed. When they're not informed enough, you can just grab those people, even if they're smart people, but they're very busy, especially in the Western world.
Yeah.
People are running around like, they're extremely busy all day. They've got 10 minutes a day to hear something about Armenia or listen to a piece of news, and then they get the wrong quote unquote news.
Yeah.
And they take that and you tell them that 10 times. By the time they hear it 10 times, it becomes true.
Yeah.
And it could be complete fabrication or complete, exaggeration of the truth.
But here's the thing: who are the? First of all, why is that they're fabricated news? Who are these people? Is it within Armenia, inside Armenia? Where's the source coming from? What is their agenda? I mean, why would anybody put the wrong headline?
Well, a lot of it starts from Armenia because Armenia is, I hate to say it, but it is a third world country in every sense of the way. And that doesn't mean we don't have a really sophisticated cultural heritage. And we've got a lot of culture in Armenia. So I'm not comparing ourselves to other third world countries per se, but we're an Eastern European third world country. In other words, we never really recovered from the 1990s collapse of the Soviet Union. And we could never get out of it. And with everything else going for us, we're a 3,000-year-old nation, a 3,000-year-old country with one of the world's best cultural heritage. We just could never, and we had a lot of educated, smart people. We could never transform that transition into a successful economy and a successful country. And as a result, people are, when you got people who are making $300, $400, $500 a month, it's really easy to misinform them. And so you've got, as a small country, as a relatively poor country, it's really easy to form political forces, to create political forces.
What, 83 of them right now over there?
Yeah. So, and all you need is $1 million and you'll create the strongest political force you can imagine. So you don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of influence. And those forces from within Armenia have been, basically some of the forces have been very instrumental in creating negative forces in the diaspora. And I'm no political analyst. I'm really not an expert in politics, but I see it every day, and I see how deliberate misinformation is being sent out of Armenia by so-called online news channels, and then it ends up in the U.S. and it ends up on Facebook pages or Instagram pages, and then you've got people going on the street and rallying because of that piece of news, and I'm like, you guys even know what you're doing?
Yeah, that was rampant during especially the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. So. But all of that goes back to one thing that I said. It's the fact that Armenians in the diaspora are not in touch with the realities of Armenia. They haven't brought Armenia into their hearts and lives, not just hearts, but also lives, in their everyday lives. And the lack of that fact has basically allowed those negative forces to do what they're doing, and they have a free way to do whatever they want to do, because people are just they need information. They want to do something right for Armenia. They don't know what's going on, and they'll believe the first thing they hear. And if they hear it enough, then it's got to be true.
Yeah, tell a lie 100 times, it becomes truth.
So we need to, sooner or later, we need to start basically creating a single entity of our nation, a single Armenian nation. No more diasporas, no more Artsakhs, a single homeland. Everybody's surrounding that homeland. That homeland is the epicenter of every single Armenian, okay? And in anything any Armenian does in the diaspora, any decision any Armenian makes in the diaspora that has anything to do with Armenia or Armenians in general, it better be, and it needs to be, for Armenia. Because
How do
we're
we do
nothing
that?
without our homeland.
How do we do that? What is, how do we, when you said that every Armenian needs to make Armenia their home, that connection, what is the right way to do this, in your opinion? How do we get this unity, reconnected again, and that vision you're describing? How do we make this work? How do we make it happen? What's the right? What are the steps?
Well, I might not be smart enough to sit down and devise all that, but I certainly have some ideas. You're talking about concrete ideas, but I'll tell you this: the first thing we got to do is think that Armenia is above everything else in our lives, everything else. And I know people say family comes first, but if we can just put family aside for a second, put our personal lives aside for a second, we need to basically wake up every morning, whether we're the leader of a political organization or a cultural organization, and say, what are we going to do for Armenia today? And if we're building a new community center, if we're building a new school, we need to do anything and everything that we do in the diaspora. Every decision we make has to be oriented towards the existence and development of Armenia. We have wasted so much of our resources in the past 100 years in the diaspora because a certain political or non-political organization wanted to build a new church or a new political center or community center without really realizing that the investment we make, and this is the direct answer to your question, we've got a limited number of people in our nation, and we've got, as a result, a limited amount of resource, whether it's human resource, financial resource, spiritual resource, every other way, scientific resource, political resource. We need to make sure that resource serves Armenia first and foremost. Not because I'm no longer in the diaspora and I don't care about the diaspora. I do. But the reality is the diaspora, history has proven that the diaspora is basically a page in our book, and it comes and goes. Some of the strongest diaspora communities we've had, people who came from Sasun, the Sasunsis, the people we're so proud of. They went from Sasun directly to Fresno in the 1990s. They were given cash visas by the U.S. government because there was a policy of basically emptying Sasun out after the first revolution of Sasun in 1894. So what happened? Those people founded a city. That city was founded by the Sasunsis. It was a small village. 30,000 Sasunsis went to Fresno and they started a whole new civilization in Fresno.
The entire farming system.
By 1950, 55 years later, where were the Sasunsis? You could still see the names of Sasunsis, the last names of Sasunsis on, Solomonian or Tekelian or whatever.
Yeah.
But where were those people? Where were the third generation Sasunsis, second, third generation Sasunsis? By the 1950s, they were all assimilated in a town which had 90% Armenian Sasunsi population.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is we have to come to terms with the reality that there is no future for us in the diaspora. And it's all temporary in the diaspora. Anybody who tells you otherwise, I think, is fooling themselves. And I can't believe that anybody believes that the diaspora can survive, literally maintain itself and sustain itself. I cannot believe anybody can believe that. Any sound Armenian can believe that. Yeah. Maybe a romantic who just landed from Armenia, who's in a little ghetto of Armenians and having, chorovats every Sunday might believe that, but even that's going to be temporary. A year or two later, he'll see his kids go to school and come back and say, "Hi, Daddy."
Yeah.
The fact is that everybody, I think, anybody who's smart enough and honest enough is going to admit the fact that the diaspora is temporary. That's not to say that we need to ignore the diaspora. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is our national resources, and I listed some of them specifically, need to be focused on Armenia. Because at the end of the day, if we want to maintain the diaspora and Armenia together, as long as we can, the diaspora, because the diaspora is a fact, we can't get away from it, we need to make Armenia stronger. Because Armenia is the strongest resource we have, not only to maintain our homeland and our national identity, but also through Armenia, we can help the diaspora survive longer. A vivid example of that is the country you brought an example for, Israel.
Israel.
The fact is,
just gonna say that again.
the fact is, our country, had it been, and when it does become a strong, powerful country, it will be the strongest source of Armenian heritage and the strongest source of Armenian identity, and the strongest and the best way for diaspora Armenians to keep their identity by using Armenia's power, Armenia's national identity.
Yeah.
So I think every diaspora thinks the other way. They all think, well, no, it's a one-way street. We're always helping, and they call us people, Armenians who eat oranges. No. But the fact is, the opposite is more true than what diasporans believe. But it hasn't been true. It can be true, but it hasn't been applied because our governments in Armenia, successive governments and the diaspora leadership hasn't thought this way. They've always thought, we'll do what we have to do. We'll build a village. We'll build a house. We'll renovate a school, and we're done. The next project will be next year.
No, that's not how it works.
Easy way out.
And it's frustrating, Vicken. It's very frustrating to think about all this stuff. I think we have plenty of community centers here. We have plenty of churches. These finances need to be directed towards building better infrastructures in Armenia, better schools, better programs. The diaspora, like you said, we're educated enough where we can take what we've learned here and use it, just like how Israel does it.
We've talked
all the resources we have here, from the lawyers to the doctors to the construction to everything, development. We need to take these and now rebuild Armenia. Like you said, create this powerful, the tech center, the military, the infrastructure, the financial system, bring in healthcare system, all this stuff. We can do it, but a lot of people have
difficulty leaving the comfort of their lives, especially in major developed cities like LA. A lot of people aren't going to leave, and that's the unfortunate part about it. Now, they could keep sending money all they want, but they could keep talking about, I would love to go back to Armenia one day. And
listen, we're all at fault. We're all at fault. Why aren't we doing it? We keep them, it's difficult. We have kids. We have this. We have that. We have a business. Blah blah blah. We all make excuses. Listen, I came here at 88. I've never gone back. Why? Why haven't I been back? 88.
At least I got that over you.
Yeah,
I've gone back numerous times.
Don't people to get me?
No,
it's advocating that every Armenian should live in Armenia.
No.
We can't do that. We can't do that.
I'm not saying that Armenians who don't live in Armenia are less Armenians. I'm also not saying that Armenians who don't visit Armenia, God knows how many times a year, are not good Armenians. That is not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, when I say Armenia needs to be the epicenter of every Armenian's life, that means wherever we live, okay? Yeah, if we can go back and live in Armenia. In some cases, I think Armenians should not go back to Armenia because they can better serve Armenia living where they are.
I agree with you. In some cases, yes.
But we've got resources. We're a people. We're a nation. We've got everything from scientists to technologists to engineers to architects to medical professionals. We've got a whole nation of people who are basically melting like the ice in the summer of heat in Saudi Arabia, and that's how fast Armenians are assimilating.
They don't even speak Armenian. It's unbelievable. Again, like I was watching videos the other day from one of the schools, and these kids they're apparently saying praises to celebrate the Armenian soldier. What was it, a couple of days ago or something like that. They can't even speak Armenian. It's embarrassing. Like, I feel bad. And that comes from parenting. It comes from the school system. It's sad. It's sad to see how assimilated our kids. Even I have 3 of mine, and they're, me and my wife argue about this all the time. Like, it's like, it's like,
look,
very.
My example was mine. I was born and raised here. My family came here a long, long time ago, early to mid 70s. And at some point in my late teens to early 20s, I kind of got completely disconnected from my Armenian heritage. Did I learn how to speak, read, write in Armenian? Yes. I went to Armenian schools, but got disconnected until some things happened in life and I started going to Armenia again. That changed my life. Completely changed my life. You know, we've talked about this a bunch of times. I have a bunch of friends, I have a bunch of individuals that I know that got impacted just from one visit.
Yeah.
And it flipped them completely.
Yeah. My thing is, and
something happened.
I think, and this is, I'm someone who hasn't done this, and I keep saying it, but obviously everybody's lives, things happen in life and it doesn't work out the way you want it. But if you can, I think at least once a year with your children, go to Armenia, make it a habit.
It changes.
It's your first home, I should say. Go to Armenia. School's off, go to Armenia. Yes, you can travel, you can go to your Italies, you can do this, you can do that, but Armenia should be first. Those kids need to smell the air, drink the water, eat the food, join the scouts over there, be involved. There's Tumo Center. There's so many things for these kids to understand, because I've seen kids who've gone and experienced this and they come back completely a different person.
A single trip.
Single trip.
One visit.
Imagine what a single visit is doing.
Yeah.
And now imagine what a lifetime of living with Armenia, even if you're away from Armenia, could do to you as an Armenian. And this goes back to what I was saying. Armenia has more to give the diaspora than the diaspora has to give to Armenia.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if a single trip does that, I'll let you guys imagine the rest of it.
Yeah.
Living testament.
There you go.
That's exactly what happened.
I want to thank everybody again for joining us live. Vicken Arabian from Support Our Heroes Armenia is joining us live in the studio. Our topic today is Artsakh. We kind of got straight away from it, but again, everybody, you see that little hashtag on top of the left of your the QR hashtag QR code. Sorry, producing a show here. Go ahead and scan that. That will take you directly to the supportourheroes.am page where you guys can donate. This is a great organization. We've known them for a long time with Edgar, who's sitting right here. He's a good
he's co-producing the show.
He's doing sign language.
He's coaching me.
Yeah. It's texting, say this, say that. But again, so please go ahead and donate. And I want to mention, you see the little ticker going down down on the bottom of the screen. For this month, if you guys purchase anything, any of the items we have on our website, you'll get a 10% discount by using the promo code hash. Why do I keep saying hashtag? Promo code Artsakh, all capital letters. And then we'll donate another 10% of that. We'll basically match it and give it to Support Our Heroes Fund. Let's go back to, let's talk about Support Our Heroes. Now, I believe 2016, when the 4-day war broke out, that's where you guys kind of started the movement, I would say, right? Let's talk about how you started Support, because you guys didn't have this going before. Everything we talked about as far as what you were doing, the development and stuff, that wasn't through Support Our Heroes. That was just you and a group of friends.
Organization. I was co-founder of Yerger Union, but and also some other work outside of that organization, much work that I had done. But Support Our Heroes was born because of the necessity that I realized I came to understand. The incredible necessity that the Army had on the logistical side and on the medical field immediately after the war broke out. Basically, the 2016 so-called 4-day war, it was really a 12, 13-hour war. By the time we all got there, the war had ended. In fact, no one even knew the war was going on when the war was going on. The war started on Saturday morning, 2:30, and it lasted until 3 o'clock that Saturday afternoon. The peace treaty, or not peace treaty, but the truce was signed 4 days later. That's why it's called a 4-day war. But there was no physical confrontation after that. All confrontations ended. So by the time we got there on Sunday, we went to the front lines. There were friends, 5 of us friends. And our goal, we heard about it on Sunday. Saturday night, we started hearing about it in Yerevan. No one knew what was going on. They were keeping it, hush hush. And by Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, we had 90 martyrs already, but no one knew. On Saturday night, they announced 14 martyrs, Saturday night. But I started calling, of course. When I got the news, I started calling. And we knew there were some skirmishes. And so we were all busy that day, like any other regular day, usual day. And then by Saturday night, I started making phone calls. And by early Sunday morning, I realized, no, it's really bad. But I knew that at that moment, the confrontation had stopped. Of course, no one knew whether it was going to restart or not. So we assumed it was going to restart. So we got in my car, myself and 4 friends of mine, and we drove straight to Stepanakert, from there to Hatrut. We went to the front lines. We realized the war had stopped, literally. There was no immediate threat, and the army had sent a lot of reinforcements already. But the reality on the ground was so bad. Just the front lines, and I had worked with the army for years, but I had never really come to that. I guess I had never really realized how bad some of the logistical and medical needs were the army had. So I immediately went back to Stepanakert, and I went back to the ministry, defense ministry, and I said, we got problems. What do you need? What can we do to help? So. And then a list was formed of the things they needed, everything from sleeping bags to rain ponchos to, tents, and one thing led to another, and canteens, military canteens, and then just thousands of other items. And eventually we ended up, donating complete brand new Toyota SUVs, Land Cruiser, complete mobile hospitals, which the Army had none, literally none. They were using old $10,000, really old, beat up medical evacuation, machines that were basically cars or vans that were basically not even ambulances. You can't call those ambulances. That's why I'm describing it this way, because they had an oxygen tank and a small medical bag. That's it. That's all they had. So if you were seriously injured on the front line, chances are you would die by the time you get to the nearest hospital or medical center. So I saw all that in a very condensed way within a few days when I was in Hatrut on the front lines, and I said, no, this cannot go on. So I stopped all the work we were doing on the civilian side, and I called some friends, and I called Harach and other friends, and I said, look, we got to help. There's some serious needs on the logistical side, and then we started helping on the medical side, and one thing led to another. People got together, and the group got larger and larger, and people believed in what we were doing. We were, at the time, and still are today, pretty bad at basically conveying the message in terms of what we're doing. They call us marketing morons, or we're really bad at that. We're really bad at that. And we're not good at showing what we're doing, because we're all volunteers. We have no staff.
You're just doing the work. You're not. You're not trying to show off what you're doing.
It takes. I know there's an argument against this, and it's probably a correct argument, a true argument. But you got to spend money to bring money in.
To bring money in,
whether it's business or, in this case, charitable. It's true. That is a true statement. But we just have been guilty of not doing that, and as a result, we haven't been very good at letting people know, including our donors, necessarily exactly what we've done and what we're doing. We're trying to get better at that, but we're still not very good at it. And so, because not only, it's not the money, it's just we don't have the resources, the time, and we're all busy like you are. We've got our lives and our businesses, and we're 100% volunteers. Our board, people like Edgar, everything we do is based on volunteer, time and effort and knowledge. So it's tough. But, we all play our part. We've got a board of directors, which is comprised of people both in Armenia and the U.S. And also Europe. We all play our part. Some of us just raise funds and do PR, whether it's PR for what we do or for mainly the cause of what we do, and others are basically doing the work on the ground. I guess I'm guilty of that. And the good news is the years of work that we've done in Artsakh, over 25 years of more than 25 years of on the ground work. Including during the war in 2020, we have come to be known in Artsakh as people you can trust. Even the corrupt people, even the corrupt officials are very, very careful. They treat us well. So there are very few people who don't treat us well in Artsakh. I cannot remember the last time I was mistreated. And even those guys, I think somehow they feel guilty because they don't want to screw us. They'll find someone else to...
Good.
And
good.
Is that still going on today?
We're Armenians. We're Golgastis. We're from the Caucasus. And is it still going on? Of course, it's going on. I mean, it was
After all
going on
this.
during the war
man.
in
Yeah.
2016.
It's been going on for 2.5, 3,000 years, man. Haven't we talked about this enough?
No, I just
But you know what?
for me it was like after the 2020. I feel like they could have dialed it down a little bit.
Well, here's the thing: people don't change,
Yeah.
and it's the system that needs to change. It's not the people. And those
Don't
kinds
you
of
think the
people are
generation
everywhere.
also needs
But
to
you
change?
These people in the U.S., you'll find them in Italy. You'll find more of them in other countries also, in some of the
I agree.
civilized Western countries. So it isn't about we have more corrupt people than other countries do. I don't think so.
No.
We need to change our system. And if the system is right, thieves will steal less.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the bottom line. Not that there aren't any thieves in the U.S., but the system punishes them. The system that they are going to be so rewarded for what they do when they do a bad deed, right? So the problem in Armenia has always been, people never went punished. I mean, the punishment didn't match the the
crime.
act.
If
So-
even there was a punishment, I mean,
But even when there was a punishment,
it was nothing.
you'd kill- I know people who killed people, literally street fight, and they got out 6 months later.
Yeah.
So because they knew somebody or their dad was somebody.
Yeah.
So the fact that the law hasn't been prevailing over anything and everybody else has been the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Our justice system has never worked. It's not even working today. And when you have a justice system like that, corruption is going to be there. Of course, I strongly believe, and I live it every day, that corruption has greatly diminished in Armenia in the last 4 years, 5 years. Anybody who tells you otherwise, he has to be or she has to be politically motivated. I'm not a member of any political party, and I'm a free thinker in that sense. I certainly have my opinions about whether it's political organizations or the government today or the previous governments. And that's not to say that I don't think freely. I do think freely. And I can tell you that corruption is brought to the minimum level it's ever been probably in Armenia in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
It's still there, but it's not systematic and it's not what it used to
That's
be.
one thing I would give to the government of bringing that corruption to a very low level. But I think it's also a generational change happening. That Soviet mentality, that oligarch, you know what I'm talking about.
Well,
that I think that has to die out. Unfortunately, that generation also brought up their kids with that mentality. So it's going to take some time. They say whenever there's a revolution, whatever you believe, if it was a revolution or not, whenever there's a change, usually it gets worse because people are trying to adapt to new ideas, new ways, new rules, new laws, and then eventually it will get better. So I think we're heading
power vacuum.
Yeah,
too.
and I think we're heading towards that that position of where it's going to start climbing up from here, hoping there's not another war or things don't get worse as far as the military and everything. Can you talk about a little bit more of how you guys have helped since once the Support Our Heroes was created? What type of work have you guys done to help the military and the soldiers, the wounded soldiers, or even up to now after this the second war?
Sorry.
It's okay. Do you want some more water?
I'm good. I'm just taking little sips. The first thing that I'd like to say about our organization is, which makes it unique, is the fact that we are an Armenian organization. Mm-hmm. In fact, we're an Artsakh organization. So we're from the Artsakh region of Armenia, and we are very much in touch with reality on the ground. We don't sponsor or develop and sponsor projects and raise funds because it's popular to do. Mm-hmm. We've never done that. In fact, we've done some of the most unpopular and hardest, toughest, most challenging projects in Artsakh that no one else wanted to touch.
For example?
Regions of Artsakh where we do work right now, mm-hmm. where we've done work, where we've done work before 2020, before 2016, they've always been the hardest to reach. And I was
nobody
giving
wanted
that
to go
example.
there.
It was a 3-hour drive from the post, from the border of Sunik and Artsakh, and a rough ride, a really rough ride. So no one had ever visited that village in 30 years, let alone build a school there. So my mentality and the mentality of all of our board members and my dear friends has been, we need to do what no one else wants to touch. We need to do
The dirty
what's
work.
most important.
Pretty much.
We need to do what's most important for Artsakh, not what's convenient for us to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can go to a school and rebuild a school in Yerevan or Vanadzor or Spidag or whatever. And there's plenty of needs there. It isn't like there aren't any needs.
Yeah.
But the fact is, the hardest work to do is in Artsakh, has always been. And before this war, we did anything and everything we did was either with the military or with on the liberated territories, which were the farthest, the hardest work to be done.
Yeah.
The most challenging, just higher risk, costlier, because you spend more money when you're driving 4 hours away from Stepanakert to get anything done. So, and the risks are higher. But the reality is that's where the needs were. So our priority has always been Artsakh's priority, and it's still the case today. Today we're building a whole new community, basically a new community inside the Nakhchivannik village. Where is Nakhchivannik? It's literally a half a kilometer away, a few hundred meters away from the Azeri soldiers on the front line with Agna. And people always ask me, are you going to find people who want to live there? Because no one wants to live in Nakhchivannik anymore. And that's not an exaggeration. It's dangerous to live there. It's challenging to live there. There's not even a single market in the village. There hasn't been one there for 30 years. You need to drive 8 miles or 8 kilometers to get to Askeran to go to any market. And the road from Nakhchivannik to Askeran is actually dangerous, and the Turks can see it. In fact, 6 months ago they were bombing that road when or about a year ago.
Oh yeah, that was that.
Or
recent,
even twice they did that.
Recent skirmish, right? That was around that
the
area.
skirmishes were in Paruf, but that's a little bit away from there, not too far. Yeah. But then the road from Askeran to Nakhchivannik was under sniper attack and basically small rocket attack. So my point is, it's challenging to live in Nakhchivannik, and it's challenging for us. But we believe that Artsakh is in Stepanakert. We believe, in fact, we don't do anything in Stepanakert that's not military. If it's military, we do.
That's like how people think Yerevan is people forget that there's places outside of Yerevan.
Yeah, it's the realm of Armenia. Yeah, basically.
That's what I'm saying. Like Stepanakert, everybody thinks of Artsakh as Stepanakert, but no, there's obviously all these other
reasons. The risk is much higher for our projects. We know that. We understand that. We try and convey that message to our donors. And it's, we do work in Mardagert. Today, Mardagert is about 95 kilometers away with the new road away from Stepanakert. It used to be a 40-minute drive. Now it's an hour and 40-minute drive. And because we used to go through Agna. And now that Agna is occupied, albeit temporarily, I do believe we're going to liberate our territories in Artsakh sooner or later. But fact is, right now, it takes an hour and 45 minutes to get to Mardagert, city of Mardagert. So Mardagert is now, Dumbak city, Artsakh, and no one wants to do anything there. And there are very few individuals and organizations who even drive to Mardagert because the drive there is also dangerous. The fact is, you're under sniper. Turkish snipers, Azeri snipers, are looking down on you from a couple of hundred meters when you're driving into Mardagert.
That segues me into the question I was going to ask, since you started describing the roads to said destination points where you guys are doing some work. Has anybody, and I hope this is a no answer, has anyone from the organization gotten hurt from anything that may have posed a danger over the years? No,
we've never had any. We're careful, but
Oh, I'm sure. That's good news.
But our mentality
that's really good news.
Well, our philosophy is if it's dangerous, if it's risky, if it's challenging, if it's tough, if it's anything that's negative to a single person in Artsakh, then we shouldn't be the ones complaining. We should be the last ones to complain. We should not complain at all. In fact. Who are we to complain? I mean, I'm a visitor when I go to Artsakh. I'm Karabakh. Everybody calls me Karabakh, and I have a home in Shushi. I've had it for 22 years now, and I still have it. I own it. And I know, not only in my heart, but also in my mind, that we're going to liberate Shushi sooner or later, and I'm going to get my home back. And it's not because of the fact that I want my home back, my house back, but it's the fact that it's a 140-year-old Armenian house, and it belongs to an Armenian, whether it's me or anybody else. It doesn't matter. And the fact is that we we do not. I've never thought we have, even us, even myself, even like people like ourselves who are constantly in touch and constantly working in Artsakh. I don't believe we have the moral or any other right to complain, because if we're going to complain, then what should the people who live in Artsakh, the wives, the widows who have lost their husbands in the war, who've got 2, 3 little children in the house, who have no income, who've lost their house and their husband, what should they say?
Yeah.
Who are we to complain? And I'm not even talking about diaspora Armenians. I'm talking about Armenians who live in Armenia. I'm talking about myself. So we need to really put things in perspective here. Yes, we have the right to be upset. We have the right to be maybe a second a day. We all have the right to be demoralized, but that shouldn't last more than a second or two, because at the end of the day, if we look back at our history, there's no question we've seen harder times than this. You read about, and I've read a lot about the days our nation lived in between 1914 and even before that, 1914 and 1920, 23. Mm-hmm. Those were some really tough times. I mean, we're talking 35,000 orphans in Armavir.
Yeah.
And 300 of them dying every day from, what's called Pidzavor Dif at the time. It was a bacterial infection, I think. And point is, we lived some really tough times as a nation. And we have absolutely no right to be demoralized. We have absolutely no right to give up. And if there is someone who's going to give up, it isn't going to be us. It isn't going to be anybody who's in this room, at least.
Yeah.
Okay? But even those people aren't giving up. I mean, I'm getting WhatsApp and email and voice messages and calls. I got close to like 40 calls and WhatsApp messages, or maybe 50 on New Year's Day, on New Year's Eve, from Artsakh. And it was amazing, because I should have been the one telling these people that I'm with you. I'm strong. I'm standing strong on your side. They were the ones telling me, widows who had lost their husbands, a 30-year-old woman who's lost her husband was telling me to stay strong, and she's never going to leave, and she would never let the blood of her husband and his friends go in vain. And she was the one telling me that, not me telling her. The opposite should have been true. I should have been telling her, don't give up. She was telling me not to give up. So that's the kind of people we're dealing with here. This is the best, most noble kind of Armenian. And this isn't a romantic statement. It's true. That's the kind of people who live in Armenia are.
Yeah.
So if for no other reason, we owe it to them to do everything in our power to keep Artsakh Armenian today. And because at the end of the day, if there are no Armenians living in Artsakh, if we're not the vast majority, the only people who live in Artsakh, then there is no Artsakh. We don't need Artsakh in our hearts.
Well, that's what they're trying to do right now.
Dikranagert is in my heart. Okay, I'm a Dikranagertsi. People ask me, where are you from? I said Dikranagertsi. I'm a Dikranagertsi. And we're talking Mids and Dikran. We're talking Dikranagertsi, right?
Yeah.
But how much of Dikranagert is Armenia today? There are 2.5 million Kurds living there.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here? Is it Armenia? Has it been Armenia? What part of Dikranagert is Armenia today? None. Yeah, historically, culturally, every other way in our hearts, it's Armenia. But what good is that?
I feel like historically we've been very easy to persuade to forget our heritage. And,
because
and take what was given to us at that moment and adapt to it and move on. And I believe our ancestors have made a lot of mistakes through government decisions, not standing up enough, I guess, but that's a different podcast episode. I wanted to ask you, what are you guys doing to raise more funds for these special projects you guys are doing, these dangerous projects that you are doing, and also how can people get involved to be part of Support Our Heroes?
Well, I'm not sure if you're displaying our homepage on the screen here. But
Well, that little thing, the
QR code.
QR code.
Yeah, scan the QR code, you
I don't know
guys.
if they can click on it. I don't know if you guys maybe can you click on that? I don't know, but if you can
somebody
scan it,
confirm
yeah, if you
if
can
it
scan
works.
it, people can go to the thing to the webpage.
So unless they know one of our board members in the U.S., I recommend that they send us an email, establish contact with us, and that email address is soh.fund@gmail.com.
SOH.
And that's also available on our website. So all they have to do is go to our website, homepage, or they can go on our Facebook or Instagram page and send us a message.
Yeah, which is support our heroes.am, guys. It's very basic. So you can, like I said, you can scan that or just go there.
Yeah, so they can somehow contact us through email or Facebook or Instagram, and then and they're all clickable from the homepage, so they can start from the homepage. And from there, we welcome everybody's help in any way or fashion offered to us, whether it's financial, whether it's resources, whether
Voluntary.
it's volunteerism. So, excuse me. So it just depends on what they have to offer. And we're an open book organization. We're a 501c3 in the U.S. We're a charitable organization registered in Armenia. And everything we do is solely in Artsakh. We do not do anything outside of Artsakh. And everything we do is in the border regions of Artsakh. As I said, yes, it is in the riskier areas of Artsakh, definitely. And we're proud of what we're doing because that's the way it's got to be done. I've always said Armenia starts from the remote rural areas of Artsakh.
Yeah.
And Armenia ends there. So
It's a brave approach, man.
well,
It's an amazing approach.
Yeah.
It really is.
We're Middle Eastern, arguably a Middle Eastern nation, and the Middle Eastern nations have a really bad habit of centralizing everything, including political power, and even businesses run that way in Armenia. So that's been one of our strongest, I guess, negative aspects of our lives in Armenia, and that's no different for any other, ex-Soviet country or even Middle Eastern country. So the best hospitals are in Yerevan. The best, the center of the government is literally on the Republic Square.
Yeah.
I've never understood why it needs to be there. Why the prime minister or president need to sit in the center of Yerevan? Why? Why can't you sit right outside of the center of Yerevan? Why does it have to be in the center? My point is, we need to think outside the box. We need to understand and come to terms with the fact that, yes, it is riskier to do charitable work, strategic work outside of the center. In this case, outside of the center of Artsakh, outside of Stepanakert. And if we want to keep Armenian Artsakh, then we need to start from the borders. There is no
And that's what I'm saying. It's a brave, bold move. That's amazing. I mean, anyone you talk to usually, like you said, kind of strays away from that, stays in the safe zone, develops in safe zones. Any charity, anything like that from just other countries, not just necessarily Armenian cause, but everything seems to go to like a centralized area.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's easier. But
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying.
For doing that.
Sure, no. It's not a matter of
resources.
criticism. It's not a matter of criticism. It's just this is where it never crossed my mind.
Well, we can.
Interesting.
We believe that that's the way it should be done, and we also can. Yeah. We have the resources in the sense that we are extremely familiar with Artsakh. We know Artsakh like the back of our hand, and we know people in Artsakh, and that's resource. That's human resource, and it's probably a lot harder for other organizations, for other people, individuals to do what we do. But we love to be the channel of any organization. And we've done this many, many times already, where we have been the channel of facilitating a certain project, giving them guidance, giving them contacts, whatever we need to do to help other organizations or even individuals accomplish their goals in Artsakh. If it's good for Artsakh, we're there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether it's done under our name or anybody else's name. We don't care.
Sure.
We don't give a damn. As long as it's good for Artsakh, we're there. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. So we've always believed that the center of Armenia is basically on the borders, and that's no different for Artsakh today as the region of Armenia that's most endangered today. And the bottom line is today's work needs to be focused on both helping Armenians live in Artsakh in a dignified way, and also helping the armed forces maintain their integrity and their readiness and their military readiness. Now, we're not in the military business of supporting the military directly, but we certainly help alleviate their problems.
Some of the pressures,
some of the pressures, whether it's medical. We're building a medical center, I should say, a rehab center in the center of Stepanakert, but that's a military project. That's why military in the sense that it's not directly military, but it's a rehab center for the soldiers, for the wounded. And you were asking about that. And
that was in one of the clips in the video, no?
Yeah. We're basically buying old houses and renovating them and furnishing them completely in Mardagert. And Mardagert is the forgotten city today. And we're doing everything possible to keep people in Mardagert, especially with the road being so long today to get there. And we're also doing work in Askeran. We're building a new community of 16 brand new homes, 140 square meter, we're talking about 1,500 square feet, with a bunker. Each one has its own reinforced bunker. And we're also building another project right now in Nakhichevanik, which is an IT center, which we're just about to complete. And it's going to be the first of its kind. It's very unique. It's going to be a co-working center after they graduate from our school. So we're building...
it's a program connected to it.
Program where...
Very cool.
Kids from 16 to 30 years old, people, youngsters, they can join our program. They'll go through a test, and then once they qualify, they'll join it. We'll be training them, giving them IT education, there's a little bit of English language and a lot of IT, whether it's basic IT and some front end, some back end, and then eventually 10 months later, 11 months later, they'll graduate, and we will transfer them from one side of the building to the other side with a different entrance, and that'll be a co-working center. And in the co-working center, they'll be working for Yerevan-based organizations, but sitting in our co-working center in their village,
remotely, basically,
without leaving.
Yeah.
And now
that's such a great way of...
For the men, though, does the military, the fact that they have to serve in the military, get in the way of this? I mean, 16 to 30, how long is this program that you guys are setting up? Do they still have the military thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The 2 years mandatory, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Does that get in the way of anything? No.
Well, the program is new. We haven't started it yet.
Yeah,
I mean, we're completing the building.
Or is it going to get in the way of anything?
Well, so what? They go to
serve and they go to
come back,
and we'll guarantee them their jobs when they come back, because we will ensure their jobs once they graduate.
And don't forget, if it starts at 16, by the time they go to the army, they'll have enough skill to use it in the army in IT work. So
it doesn't have to start at 16. People right now, we've got teachers in the Nakhichevanik school who have applied to us saying, we want to join too.
Yeah.
We're talking about a 28-year-old mom with two kids, and she wants to join. She's excited. She's waiting anxiously for the center to open.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a 16-year-old. It could be a 20-year-old. It could be a 25-year-old. We just want to give a meaning, not only the education level, but also the meaning for these youngsters to stay in the village and not go to Stepanakert, let alone Yerevan, or let alone to
it's the concept of, when you talk about developing a city, you build the houses, you build the stores, but people have to be able to work. So you have to give them some kind of an incentive to want to live there and be there and not leave, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. And that's how you build communities. If you just build homes and you don't offer any type of infrastructures that you can set up businesses, schools, or if they're not going to be able, so that means now they live there, they have to travel to work somewhere else, which makes it difficult.
And most migration.
There you go. Most of the times when they're working in Yerevan or working somewhere else, they're going to end up eventually moving there. It's natural for humans to do that. Vicken, I want to ask you. We've talked about, and I see your passion, I see your love, and honestly, it's really intoxicating, almost like I want to like get up and go right now,
fly there tomorrow morning.
From everything you've experienced from the early days, being there in the 90s and helping and doing so much, where do you see this Artsakh conflict, the situation in Artsakh in 5 years?
it's tough for me to not mix what I feel, what I want, and what I might even be able to, if I can, envision based on the reality on the ground. It's tough for me to separate those from each other. So I'll admit it. I'm the first one to admit it. At the same time, I've always believed that anything you do in life, that's what separates us from animals, is to dream first.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't dream about something, if what you do doesn't start with a dream, it'll never be done right, if it gets done at all. So I can see the dream in our people's eyes and hearts when it comes to Armenia, and that includes Artsakh. So I'm convinced, beyond a reasonable doubt, that we're going to be able to put ourselves, pull ourselves together again as a country, as a nation. And yes, there's going to be some really tough times, and there's going to be more families losing their children in the coming months and years, unfortunately. And that is the biggest loss we had during the last war and even after that. But the reality is, I strongly believe, in not just in my heart, but also in my mind, that we're going to be able to go through these tough times. And sooner or later, we will have enough strength, and the political climate is going to be such that we will. And I know this is going to be, anybody who hears this from me is going to say, what a romantic. This guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. They'll say anything. But you know what? If we went through the 1915 genocide, and 3 years later we were able to reestablish our political entity, our country as a country, 700 years after losing our
Kingdom.
Yeah.
If we went through that and we lost more than half our nation, and with 650,000 people, we were able to forge a new country, okay, on a small part of Armenia in 1918, we can go through this. We will go through this. And I believe it in my mind that we will go through this. And I also believe that we'll see it ourselves. This isn't, I'm not talking 50 years from now, 100 years from now. I'm talking in the next 10 to 15 years, we will be in a position to re-liberate what we've lost in Artsakh. We will be able to get Artsakh back all the way down to the Ox River, including Karabakh and Kashatagh, because we're a nation and they're not. Everything they do is politically motivated.
Mm-hmm.
And fact is, we're pretty bad at politics.
And one thing, if I can add, they don't know how to live on that land.
It's not their land. They've never lived on that land.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Even if they spent billions and billions of dollars every year, which they're claiming that they are, it doesn't matter.
Let them build the roads. It's okay. We'll take them.
It doesn't matter. It's not their land. It'll never be their land. And sooner or later, we'll get it back. Because what we've done in the last 30 years, what we're doing today, what we'll be doing the next 30 years, is we'll be driven out of our love for our country. What they're doing is completely driven out of political and financial greed.
And their dictator will
that
sooner or later. Yeah.
In the long run, they're going to lose. We're going to win.
Of course. And dictators come and go. So his days are numbered as well. Anything you want to mention, add to our audience that will, be joining us later on, whoever's watching live right now? First of all, I want to thank everyone who's joining us live.
First of all, I'm sitting here in Burbank, California, so...
You gave away our location. I'm kidding.
Well, it was...
Cover blown, guys. Let's go.
Back up. What I meant to say was that I guess my audience is mostly the diaspora, our audience. And we wouldn't exist without the diaspora. 99% of our funds, maybe I'm exaggerating, 97% of our funds come from the diaspora. Support Our Heroes is based on the love of diaspora and the belief of the diaspora towards Armenia and towards people like us who apparently are believable. Apparently they trust us enough to give us a dime or 1,000 dimes or whatever they give us, we're thankful for. And we are committed, and we are going to continue to be committed to staying focused on Artsakh. Our bylaws basically state that everything we do will be in Artsakh. believe it or not. So it isn't just a way of thinking today. It cannot change tomorrow. We're all about Artsakh. We will continue to focus on Artsakh. We will do everything and anything humanly possible to support every single Armenian who lives in Artsakh. And I want to tell you guys directly, I'm not going to ask you not to give up. I'm going to say you have no right to give up. Okay? Diasporans or Armenians alike in Armenia do not have the right to give up. This isn't about, please don't give up. No, this is about, don't even dare to give up. Okay? Because if there's anybody who needs to give up or wants to give up or has the right to give up, it's the people who live in Artsakh. And they're not giving up. So stop it. No one's giving up. Okay? It doesn't matter how bad of a war we lost. Yes, we did. But it was a battle. And we have not lost the war. Okay? And I don't want a single drop of blood to be spent anymore. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be done. It will happen. I know it will happen. We knew this war was going to happen. There's going to be another war, but eventually we're going to prevail. Because we're not the kind of people who give up. We're just not.
Yeah. Okay? History has shown that.
History has shown that. I mean, we're one of the smallest nations in the world, and look at where we are today. Look at some of the larger nations who have come and gone in the past 5,000 years.
Yeah, empires or nations that don't exist.
Every country, every nation says they're resilient. It's a classic thing to say.
Yeah.
But fact is that we are resilient.
Of course.
I mean, history has really shown that. Of all the atrocities, all the tragedies our nation has seen, it's a miracle we're still around. But if you come to understand and get to know our nation, our people, and the most noble kind of it in Artsakh, you'll realize why we are so resilient. You'll realize why we've lasted so many thousands of years. Because of the type of people we are. It's our kind.
Yeah.
And
it's the DNA.
We owe it to ourselves to survive, to not give up. So we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going stronger than ever. And, I'm 100% confident that our kids are going to look back and say, yes, it was a horrible decade, but look at where we are today.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you say, from your mouth to God's ears?
God's ears, yeah.
Well, this was a very enlightening and interesting conversation. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time. I know you got so much to do to be here with us. We appreciate it. I want to thank everybody who joined us. Again, make sure you guys
scan the QR
code, not the hashtag.
Not the hashtag.
And make sure you go and support this great organization, support our heroes. They're doing some great works. If you missed the video, if you're just joining us later on, you can watch it. You can go see everything they've done from the earlier days to still doing it, especially with this blockade. I can't imagine how difficult it is for you guys. And at the same time, like I mentioned, we are going to donate 10% of whatever you purchase through our website. You use the promo code Artsakh. You see it in the bottom ticker right there. We will donate another 10. We'll match it and donate it to their fund as well. Anything else you want to mention? Any other projects you're working on that you might want people to donate towards?
Well, I just want to say that we've got some incredibly strong believers in Artsakh, our contractors, our friends, and I know this is hard to imagine but much of our construction is going on today. Mm-hmm. So at this moment in time, at this very moment, people are working at the job sites. And with no gas, no diesel, and much of the construction material hard to get. People aren't even able to get from one place to another to get to work. But we've been quite ingenious. When there's a will, there's a way.
It's unbelievable.
So and we owe so much to our Artsakh friends who are basically making the impossible possible, and they're working. They're working in these
with
conditions.
the blockade now.
With the blockade, we're continuing the work.
What can you specify what work it is that they're doing?
Yeah, we're doing major construction work in Nakhchivan at the moment.
Okay.
In fact, there was a Artsakh Herosner about a week ago had a reportage on us at on their news channel. So it showed the fact that we had people working there, and it's one of the very few construction sites that's still going on in Artsakh. And you know what? It's not just because we want to keep the construction going. It's almost for spite. It's almost for I hate to use that word, but it's almost to show to ourselves, to our nation, to our people, but also to the enemy. And I say, without mixing my words, to the enemy, to the Azeris. And they are the enemies. That they can starve us, they can take away more than half our lands temporarily, but we'll keep building because it's our lands, because we believe it's ours, and it is ours. If it wasn't ours, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
We would not be doing this on someone else's land.
We're not the type of people to take other people's land and claim it's ours. It's our land. It's always been our land. History has proven it. All the maps have proven it. The oldest map in the world has proven it. So they can take their, excuse my language, bullshit history that they've created with their Albanian, churches and this and that, and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. So that's the bottom line. We are going to keep fighting. It like you said, we're going to get everything back. And if you believe it, it will happen. So I know it's hard when you're down, but like you said, you have to dream it. You have to go after that dream and execute it, and you will get there eventually. That's just how life works.
Yes, it does.
So, well, again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I want to thank everybody who joined us live, everybody in the chat. Thank you so much, guys. I know this isn't our typical type of episode, but we wanted to do this because, again,
we talked about history.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, like, I've been wanting to get Vicken on the show for a long time. Since I've met Edgar and their and learned about the organization, and like I said, time to time we're going to do these type of episodes where we're going to have to talk about our country, current events, what's happening, because we all need to do something, no matter what kind of a platform you have. If you have a voice, we need to use it. That's the bottom line. I want to mention next Thursday, February 9th, Mike Cunningham will be joining us live from Texas in Austin. We're going to talk about Armenian genealogy, and we're going to share some information that is going to blow your minds.
Yeah,
you're not going to believe how big the diaspora we keep talking about is. And it's going to be very interesting. We got some homework also set up for you guys to do while the show is happening. So that'll be next Thursday, February 9th, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Coast Standard Time. And then, as I've mentioned, Thomas DeWall has confirmed we will be doing the interview with him, and that will probably air sometime end of February. He's the author of Black Garden. I recommend everybody to get this book and read it or listen to it. There's the audio version of it. It will give you a great understanding of the whole First Artsakh War, how it started, why it started, and how it ended, and why how we ended up where we are today. Let's see. Follow us on Instagram at Mer Hersoner, patreon.com/Mer Hersoner. Support the show. Next week, we have another announcement. It's a little bit premature for me to talk about now, but we will announce it. We're working on something amazing, and I think everybody's going to be very excited once we announce it. And it's going to be a community involvement for this great project that we're going to do. Besides that, Mikey, anything you want to say?
No, I'm keeping my lips sealed. I got a little excited.
Okay. All right. Well, again, Vicken, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. As we always say, respect one another.
Love one another.
Until the next episode, take care of yourselves.